In order to fully understand all the concepts and terms that will be brought up to explain inflection, start with the orientation for this course, which is the first video of this playlist, and move forward from there in the order of the rest of the playlist. This will be the 5th video out of the 15 videos explaining Inflection Route number 1. And as explained in the orientation, Inflection Route number 1 and 2 are not each a rule, but each sets of rules. So therefore, we will be starting with Inflection Route number 1, which means that we will look into all the rules that all together constitute Inflection Route number 1 and learn which one to apply in which situation. And also, as explained in the orientation, whether we will apply the rules of Inflection Route number 1 or 2 depends on the ending you are using. Because some endings belong to Inflection Route number 1 and some belong to Inflection Route number 2. You can download a PDF file through the link in the description that will list and show you the endings that belong to each route. So the next situation within Inflection Route number 1 is when a display form of a verb or adjective ends with the vowel we once ta is erased. Now, before we start talking about inflection, I am first going to talk about the essence, the nature of this vowel that we are looking at right now. Now, if you are studying Korean alphabets, vowels in specific, now you will notice that this is a double vowel, a combination of O and E. So therefore, you might think that it should sound like oi. However, that is not the case. Without an exception, this vowel right here will always sound like we. So going back to inflection, for example, 되다 is the display form of the verb become or work, but not as in a person working, but when a tool, device, or system functions. So for example, when you want to say, my laptop isn't working, or my phone doesn't work, or the AC is finally working. So when you want to say something along those lines. So you can see that in this case, this display form ends with the we vowel once ta is erased. So in this situation, in order to inflect the ta ending into some kind of a new ending that actually has a grammatical function or attribute, I will apply a 3-step formula. Step number 1 would be to erase ta, which I already did, and step number 2 would be to change the vowel we into we. Now, these two vowels sound exactly the same. It's just like the concept of F and PH in English. So it's just that sometimes you will use this vowel and sometimes you will use this vowel. They both sound exactly the same. So in this case, we will change the we vowel into the we vowel, which means that when it comes to pronunciation when speaking, nothing changes. However, it does when writing. And then step number 3, now you can attach some kind of a new ending that you want to use instead of the ta ending. So in this case, let's use the ending for actual form present tense, which is yo, and which is also, of course, an ending that belongs to Inflection Route number 1. So according to the 3-step formula, now we have 돼요, 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 which is now the actual form, present tense, of the verb become or work, which is become or work. So in this case, let's use it as work, and since now I have an actual form with an actual ending that I can actually use, let's actually try saying a sentence for practice and say something like, it suddenly doesn't work. Now, before we start actually translating this into Korean, of course, as always, I will first omit grammatical components that should be omitted. Well, a typical reason why I would omit, in other words, erase, a grammatical component from a sentence is when that grammatical component is too obvious according to the context. So let's say the context is, my friend asks me, hey, what is wrong with your phone? And I'm going to answer by saying, it suddenly doesn't work. Now in that case, it, which is of course my phone, is too obvious according to the context. Of course I'm talking about my phone, because my friend asked, what's wrong with your phone? So it will not stay. Which leaves us with the adverb suddenly and the verb doesn't work. Now, when you are placing don't or doesn't in front of a verb, nothing can come in between. So therefore, for convenience, I always advise to look at them as one grammatical component, which is the verb, for convenience and efficiency. So therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 갑자기, 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 suddenly, in green, 안, don't, and of course doesn't as well, in orange, 돼요, 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 work, in blue. So altogether, 갑자기 안 돼요, 갑자기 안 돼요, 갑자기 안 돼요. Now let's move on to the next situation within inflection route number 1, since there aren't many examples of display forms that fall into this category. The next situation within inflection route number 1 is when a display form ends with the vowel we once ta is erased. We. For example, 쉬다, 쉬다, 쉬다 is the display form of the verb rest. Now, as you can see, this display form ends with the we vowel once ta is erased, therefore is a perfect example. So in this case, in order to inflect the ta ending into some kind of a new ending, I will apply a 3-step formula. Step number 1 would be to erase ta, which I already did. Step number 2 would be to add another syllable, all, and then step number 3, I can attach the new ending that I want to use. So in this case, let's use the ending 도 돼요, 도 돼요, 도 돼요, which is okay to. So according to the 3-step formula, now we have 쉬어도 돼요, 쉬어도 돼요, 쉬어도 돼요, which is now no longer just rest, now it's okay to rest. So now that we have an actual form with an actual ending, for practice, let's actually place it in a sentence and say something like, it is okay to rest sometimes. So let's say, my friend is working, but working too hard. So, for example, let's say, I want to say to him, it is okay to rest sometimes. So of course, before we start translating, I will first omit. In English, when there isn't anything concrete and specific that can function as a subject within the given context, you can use it as a placeholder. However, this is not a grammatical concept that you will use in Korean. Therefore, in these situations, you will not place anything that is the equivalent of it. And do not take into consideration is, am, was, were, are. So, which leaves us with an adverb sometimes and a verb okay to rest. So therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 종종, sometimes, 종종, 종종, in pink, 쉬어도 돼요, 쉬어도 돼요, 쉬어도 돼요, okay to rest, in blue. So altogether, 종종 쉬어도 돼요, 종종 쉬어도 돼요, 종종 쉬어도 돼요. And that would be the equivalent of saying it is okay to rest sometimes within this given context. For another example, 뛰다, 뛰다, 뛰다 is the display form of the verb run. So as you can see, also in this case, the display form ends with the we vowel once ta is erased. So it is a perfect example. So of course, because it is the same situation, I will apply the same three-step formula. This time, let's use the ending 써요, 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 which indicates actual form, past tense. So according to the three-step formula, now I have 뛰었어요, 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 which is the actual form, past tense of run, which is ran. So now that we have an actual form with an actual ending, now for practice, let's place it in an actual sentence and say something like, I ran in the morning. So let's say someone asks me, did you exercise in any way today? And my answer is going to be, I ran in the morning. Well, in that case, according to the context, of course, I will omit grammatical components that are too obvious. I will not stay because, of course, I'm talking about I. The question was, did you exercise in any way today? So if I'm going to answer that question, of course, the subject is I, and it's too obvious. And no us and thus, no articles used in Korean, which leaves us with the verb ran and in morning time. So therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 아침에, 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 in morning, 뛰었어요, 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 ran. So altogether, 아침에 뛰었어요, 아침에 뛰었어요, 아침에 뛰었어요. And that would be the equivalent of saying, I ran in the morning within this given context. So that was it for this video. In the next video, we will move on to the next situation and keep moving forward until we cover each and every situation and how to apply inflection route number 1 within each of them.